The best-selling electric car company on Earth is not Tesla. It is not Volkswagen, not Ford, not any brand most Americans could name off the top of their head. It is a Chinese company called BYD. And here is the detail that makes it strange. BYD does not even sell its passenger cars at retail in the United States. And yet, in 2025, it still outsold Tesla across the entire planet. Think about that for a second. A company you cannot walk into an American dealership and buy from quietly became the #1 seller of electric vehicles in the world. But the most interesting part of this story is not that BYD won. Rivals rise and fall all the time. The interesting part is what happened next. The biggest car makers in the West did not just lose ground and move on. They started copying BYD, not in a vague motivational poster way, where an executive says they admire a competitor and nothing changes. In a real, expensive structural way. Ford built a secret engineering team. Volkswagen began licensing Chinese technology. Stellantis bought a piece of a Chinese startup and is now weighing whether to build that startup's cars in Europe. And every one of them has swallowed billions of dollars in losses to reset the way they build cars entirely. When the biggest names in a century-old industry start rebuilding themselves around one rival's playbook, that is worth understanding in full. If you enjoy videos about technology, quietly reshaping the world in ways nobody saw coming, hit like and subscribe so you never miss one. Now let us get into the real story, because it starts with a man laughing on live television. Back in 2011, Elon Musk was interviewed on Bloomberg TV and asked about BYD as a competitor to Tesla. He laughed. He said he didn't think they had, quote, a great product. More than a decade later, that clip has aged badly, because the company he laughed at is now the one everyone else is studying. And the reason it caught the entire industry off guard is that BYD never really thought of itself as just a car maker. It started life as a battery company. It built its own computer chip division long before that was fashionable in the auto world. So by the time it turned all of that expertise toward building cars, it was not starting from the same place as everyone else. It was quietly holding a set of advantages its rivals simply did not have, and would not fully understand until much later. So how did a company most of the West has never driven end up cheaper, faster, and further ahead than the giants that have dominated for 100 years? That is the real question, and the answer surprises almost everyone who hears it for the first time. Ask most people why Chinese cars are cheap, and they will give you two answers without hesitating: cheap labor and government subsidies. Both of those are real factors, and nobody serious denies them. But when a major research firm actually pulled the numbers apart in early 2026, it found something uncomfortable for the West. Subsidies, it concluded, explained only a small slice of the price gap. The far bigger reason was something the industry calls vertical integration. Vertical integration sounds like dry business jargon, but the idea behind it is simple, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Most car makers are really just assemblers. They design a car, then buy the thousands of parts that go into it from a long chain of outside suppliers, and every single supplier in that chain adds its own profit margin on top of the price. By the time the finished car rolls off the line, it has paid a small tax to dozens of middlemen. BYD refused to play that game. It makes its own batteries. It makes its own chips. It makes its own motors, and even smaller pieces, like the seats and the lights. It has gone as far as investing in the mines that produce the raw material for its batteries, and it built its own fleet of ships to carry its cars across the ocean. Analysts describe the whole thing as mine to showroom. At almost every step, the value stays inside BYD instead of leaking out to somebody else. And when you own that much of the process, you can cut your prices in ways your competitors physically cannot follow, no matter how badly they want to. There is one number here worth remembering, because it is the whole story in miniature. Ford's own chief executive has said Chinese automakers can build an electric car for roughly a quarter less than American rivals can. A quarter. That is not a gap you close with a clever marketing campaign or a temporary discount. That is a structural head start, baked into how the car is made before the first customer ever sees it. The clearest example of the advantage is the battery, which makes up a huge share of an electric car's total cost. BYD builds its own, using a design it calls the blade battery, and controlling the battery means controlling the single most expensive part of the whole vehicle. That control paid off in a way nobody predicted during the global chip shortage a few years ago. When chips ran short, car makers around the world were paralyzed. But because BYD makes its own chips, it just kept building cars while Ford and General Motors were forced to shut assembly lines down and wait. That was the moment a lot of people in the industry realized this was not a normal competitor, not just cheaper, but ahead. If BYD were only winning on price, the West could dismiss it as a race to the bottom, the automotive equivalent of a discount store. But that is not what is happening. And this is the part that should get anyone who follows technology to pay attention. BYD is also setting the pace on the technology itself. In 2025, the company revealed a new charging platform it claims can add hundreds of miles of range in about 5 minutes, roughly twice as fast as Tesla's best chargers at the time. Its founder framed the goal in a single, memorable line: to make charging an electric car as fast as filling up a tank of gas. If that promise holds up at scale, it erases one of the last real reasons people hesitate to go electric. Then there is self-driving. BYD announced it would put its driver assistance system into most of its lineup at no extra charge, including a small hatchback that sells for under $10,000 in China. Now, compare that to the United States, where the equivalent Tesla feature has been sold for thousands of dollars or an ongoing monthly subscription. That contrast is what rattled executives across the industry. A company was giving away, for free, the exact feature its rivals had built their premium pricing and their investor story around. It changed what customers would come to expect, and expectations, once they shift, are very hard to shift back. So this is the picture the West woke up to: a competitor that is cheaper to build, faster to charge, and generous with the very technology everyone else was charging a premium for. Which brings us to the heart of this video. What did the Western automakers actually do about it? They did not just complain, they started copying the playbook. And the clearest example is Ford. After traveling to China and driving the local electric cars himself, Ford's chief executive, Jim Farley, came home rattled. He reportedly told one of his board members that these Chinese companies were an existential threat. That is strong language from the head of a company that helped invent the modern automobile. And rather than deny it or spin it, Ford acted on it. The company quietly stood up a small secret engineering team, staffed in part with talent pulled from rivals, and kept it deliberately separate from the rest of the business, almost like a startup operating inside a giant. Their job was to design a genuinely cheap, genuinely modern electric vehicle from a blank sheet of paper, free from the habits and assumptions that had built up over decades. Farley has called the result a Model T moment for Ford, and the target is an affordable, mid-size electric pickup. To get there, Ford is even borrowing the manufacturing tricks the Chinese pioneered, radically simplifying how the car is put together so fewer parts and fewer steps are involved. None of this was cheap. Ford has taken a write-off in the billions tied to its earlier, failed approach, essentially admitting the old way did not work. But building your own answer is only half the pattern. And honestly, it is the less surprising half. The other half is more telling. Some Western companies have decided they simply cannot out-engineer the Chinese on their own, so they are licensing the technology directly, the way you might license software rather than write your own. Volkswagen, once the undisputed king of the Chinese market, is now building electric cars on the platform of a Chinese company called Xpeng, and using another Chinese partner's technology for its Audi brand. This is happening as Volkswagen's profits in China have fallen sharply. Stellantis, the group behind Jeep, Peugeot, and Fiat, went even further. It bought a stake in a Chinese EV startup called Leap Motor, made itself that brand's distributor across the West, and is now weighing whether to use Leap Motor's own battery and drivetrain technology in its future cars. Even Renault leaned on its research operations inside China to design its newest small electric car for Europe. And Tesla, feeling the same squeeze from below, rolled out cheaper versions of its most popular models. There is a real warning buried in all of this, and the smartest people in the industry are already saying it out loud. If the valuable brains of a modern car, the software and the platform and the core technology, increasingly come from China, then storied Western companies risk quietly becoming little more than contract manufacturers. They would bolt the metal together while their Chinese partner owns everything that actually makes the car special, and everything the customer is really paying for. So why not just block it? This is the obvious question. If BYD is this dominant, why doesn't it simply flood the West and end the story overnight? The answer is a wall of tariffs, and it explains exactly why copying, rather than competing head-on, became the strategy. The United States raised its tariff on Chinese electric cars so high that it effectively slams the door shut on imports altogether. Europe took a softer but still serious approach, stacking extra duties on top of its normal import charges. There is even a coming American rule that would ban cars containing Chinese-linked technology, which threatens the very licensing deals the West is now scrambling to sign. But BYD's response to that wall is the same idea in reverse, and it is quietly brilliant. If you cannot ship a car past a tariff, then build the car on the other side of the wall instead. So BYD is putting up factories in Europe and elsewhere, taking over old plants and scouting new locations, all so it can build its cars locally and sidestep the barriers entirely. The West built a wall to keep BYD out. BYD is calmly building factories on the inside of it. That tells you something about how this company thinks. It does not fight the obstacle, it routes around it. But here is the twist. For all of that dominance, BYD's story has a darker side, and a surprisingly fragile one, and any honest telling has to include both. On the darker side, its breakneck global expansion has come with serious accusations. In Brazil, authorities raided the construction site of a new BYD factory, and later accused the company of subjecting workers to conditions they described as slavery-like, eventually adding BYD to an official government registry over the scandal. A contractor disputed the characterization, but the case became a real stain on the company in one of its most important overseas markets, and a reminder that scale achieved quickly can hide serious problems. And then there is the fragility, which is the part almost nobody expects. BYD's home market, China, is caught in a brutal price war. There are simply more factories than there are buyers, so every carmaker is slashing prices just to survive, and BYD is right in the middle of the fight it helped start. That pressure is now showing up in its own results. Even in the record-breaking year when it overtook Tesla, BYD's profit actually fell. And heading into 2026, its sales at home dropped sharply and its profit was cut roughly in half, after the Chinese government pulled back a tax break that had been propping up demand. So the world's biggest EV maker is now leaning harder on exports and pushing toward more expensive, higher-margin cars, just to steady itself. The very machine that let it conquer the market is now grinding on the company that built it. Which brings us right back to where we started. Every major Western automaker suddenly looks like it is copying BYD, because BYD did not win with one clever car or one lucky moment. It won with a whole system, one built patiently over decades, where it owns the batteries, the chips, the mines, and even the ships, and hands almost nothing to outside suppliers. The West cannot rebuild that overnight, so it is doing the next best things, spinning up secret teams, licensing the technology directly, and absorbing enormous losses to reset. And the final irony is this: they are racing to copy this company at the exact moment BYD itself is fighting to stay profitable in the very market it just conquered. The blueprint everyone suddenly wants may turn out to be far harder to hold on to than it looks from the outside. If this changed how you think about the cars showing up on roads all over the world, give it a like and subscribe for more videos on the technologies quietly reshaping entire industries. And I want to hear from you in the comments. If a company most of the West has never even driven can force the whole industry to copy it, which company do you think is doing the exact same thing right now, hiding in plain sight?